Every year in NASCAR, there is storylines going on in the background, sometimes right up front, that we have to keep an eye on throughout the year to see what happens. Sometimes they might be as minor as, well, where does this driver go at the end of the year? Sometimes they might be as major as a lawsuit going on or major TV deals going on. 2025 is no different. We have a lot of storylines going into this season that everybody is going to have their eyes on, or at least be curious on as the season goes on. And I have 10 of those today that I think we need to keep our eye on for 2025. Now, these are in no particular order or anything of importance or anything like that. This is just 10 things that I think we need to keep an eye on throughout the season or will be brought up quite often. And I really can't start anywhere else other than the lawsuit. The lawsuit is going to be a big deal this season, whether you like it or not. Now, hopefully, it gets resolved in a way that is beneficial for as many people as possible and in the best way possible for the sport as early as possible. The longer this drags on, the worse it's going to be for everybody, especially. I don't want it to be resolved quickly in a way that's not right, but I want it to not be drug on too long to where it ends up being a problem for 2026. Now, obviously, we have already had a win in the team's favor to where now seemingly they're going to both be able to buy their charters. Front Row Motorsports has already bought one of theirs, confirmed the sale. Not assuming the appeal does not return that into NASCAR's favor, but I would assume that it will not. Then 2311 can buy theirs for Riley Herbst. So we already have one big step for the team's side, but there is many more steps to this. There is going to be that full trial if it gets to that point. So that's going to be something that's going to be going on in the background, whether you like it, whatever side you're on that, is going to be a big deal going into 2025, maybe 2026. But like I said, hopefully it gets resolved quickly in favor of as many people as possible and in the best way possible for not only the sport as a whole, but for people in the teams and whatever, to make the best possible for the sport in general. And the next thing, this is something that is a topic every year. Now, whether it gets any traction this year to go any further or not is completely a mystery, and that's new manufacturer. Every year, NASCAR says, we've got a new manufacturer that's really close, and then nothing happens. Is this the year that we finally get a little bit more information, that we're getting closer to a new manufacturer? We'll just have to find out. Now, whether that's Honda, whether that's Dodge, whether that's something else, we don't know. But I think it's something to keep an eye on, especially if that begins to take place. Then we have to ask questions of, okay, which team's going to be the one to swap? Now, we know whenever Toyota came in, it was Michael Waltrip Racing, but then it was Joe Gibbs. So is there any big teams that we think, well, maybe they could be the one to swap over? That's something that we would have to debate on when that time comes. But until we have any more solid evidence that there's a manufacturer even in the talks of like being close, it's not even relevant, really. That kind of brings me to my next point. And it's a point that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but I think it's kind of important. Last year was a really tough year for RCR. Yes, Austin Dillon technically won Richmond, and he would have won Richmond anyway if it wouldn't have been that overtime finish. But besides that, RCR was completely out of it last year. And that is an interesting thing because really, in the last few years, RCR has been that number 2 team, whether you maybe Trackhouse at times, but overall it was RCR. Especially when Kyle Busch came in, it seemed like, okay, well, they are finally getting the ball rolling. That's not happening anymore. And if you took RCR out of that equation, it was Trackhouse. It was either RCR or Trackhouse is the number 2 for Chevy besides Hendrick. Hendrick was always number 1. But I think a third opponent in that conversation has entered the race, and that's Spire. I think Spire really has the opportunity to really show itself this season and to be something better. Now, whether it can go up and fight with Spire and RCR for being a consistent threat to win, that's a whole nother conversation. But I do think they are inching closer. Is 2025 that year to where people can say, maybe they are there? And there's Carson Hocevar's posting pictures of Hendrick cars. Does this mean that Spire's now becoming kind of a Hendrick Motorsports 2.0, or kind of a satellite team, kind of like how 2311 is kind of like a satellite of Joe Gibbs Racing? Maybe. We'll have to find out. But I think this is a really interesting part of the conversation that not a lot of people are talking about, because if Spire can elevate themselves, then this brings us back to the manufacturer conversation of, well, okay, does Trackhouse, now that they feel like they're not the number two, would they be more likely to go to a new manufacturer if a new manufacturer came in? The next two here are kind of a combo. The first one here being new tracks. There is the conversation of, are we going to get a San Diego street course? Obviously, Rockingham is coming in for the Xfinity Series, so could they, end up being a cup race eventually? And Chicagoland Speedway, Kentucky Speedway, both of those are tracks that maybe not everybody wants to come back, but with mile-and-a-half tracks really getting this resurgence lately, I could see them putting maybe Kentucky or maybe Chicago back onto the schedule, especially if certain tracks go off the schedule. Which brings me to my next point, tracks we might see the last of in 2025. The biggest of these is the Chicago Street Course. That was a 3-year deal. We don't really know what's going to become of it after this year. It's been said that it wasn't that profitable for NASCAR. I would be kind of sad if it had to go away, because I do think it's been a good race. Obviously, there's been conversations that San Diego could be getting that street course. Is that what's best for NASCAR? Obviously, we need that Southern California race, because Montana is nowhere near going to be getting a race in 2026, even 2027. I don't see it happening. There's been no work done on that track. I just don't see it happening anytime soon. And there's always those tracks that you're just like, is it on the cutting room floor if it happens? Like Coda, stuff like that, if it happens. Bristol, we've gotten 2 races. Everybody loves Bristol, but if another track came in that was better, is Bristol one that gets the cut? Is Kansas, their second race, the one that gets the cut? I don't think either of them are ever going to lose both of their races, but they could easily lose one if something presented itself that was just amazing for NASCAR. Hopefully not. I like both of them having 2 races, but it is what it is. And kind of on that same topic is playoff changes. We don't really know what even the playoffs for 2025 is going to look like, more or less the 2026 playoffs, because we don't know the schedule for 2026. Obviously, the 2025 schedule is kind of set up for that 10-race playoff. I don't think we're going to get anything different than that 10-race playoff with 3-3-3-1. So I would be shocked if it's anything different than that. But for 2026, we can completely shake that up. We can do, 9 races to where we have 3 rounds, 3-3-3, and have the final 4 be 3. I would kind of be okay with that. But, we could go back to a 10-race playoff, where we have basically like the chase format. Anything's open. I don't think we're going to go away from this kind of tournament bracket that we're in right now, but we don't know. And with that comes schedule changes. Surely they would not make Talladega in that final 3-race bracket if we did end up going with a 3-race playoff to end the season. That would be an awful, awful idea, because you'd have 3 guys that would end up wrecking at Talladega in the big one. You'd have one guy that ends up finishing 5th, but he's got a 30-point lead over everybody else, and he really can coast to a championship. We don't need that. But we should find out some information about the 2025 playoffs anytime now. They should tell us whether it's going to be the same, whether it's going to be slightly different. I can't imagine they would wait until the season starts to change that. They should tell everybody up front so that teams know, okay, well, this is what I should plan for. Should I go out and try to win? Should I go out and try to get points? We have to know before Daytona. I would assume we'll find out in the next few weeks. And speaking of tournament, nobody's really talking about it, but we're going to have a mid-season tournament in the 2025 season. I am super excited about this. With the way our current format is of the playoffs, whether you love them or hate them, we do have this kind of summer dog days period to where nothing is really happening. Yes, you have these few guys that are getting wins and locking themselves in, but all the guys that we know are going to get in lock themselves in early in the season. In that middle chunk, nothing really happens other than a few guys, jump in, and then a few guys are still fighting for it. Now, what we're going to get is we're going to get these in-season playoffs, where we're going to have an entire bracket, kind of like Denny Hamlin's thing that he made. I don't know exactly what their format is, but I'm excited to see how this works. How do the drivers race? Do they stay in and they stay for points for the regular season? Or do they say, nah, we ain't going to win that, or nah, we don't care, we're locked in already, or maybe we're not locked in at all, and so we're going to go for it and win that extra money. That is so exciting to me. I'm excited to see how this works. I'm excited to see how drivers react to it in general. Do they like it? Do they hate it? We'll have to find out. The next thing here is driver shakeups. From 2024 to 2025, we had quite a few drivers shaken up, or they were at the end of last year, and now we're kind of seeing what really can take place. And I'm excited to see what happens with these drivers, which ones perform well, which ones kind of don't really do is what we hope. I'm curious to see what happens with these guys. I think the biggest notable ones here, maybe not the most flashy of them, but Chase Briscoe in the 19, I think is he's got the hot seat on him because he has to perform. I know that, it's his first year in a new team. He's kind of been in this rough spot with being in basically the dying days of SHR for a few years. But I really think in good equipment, he can do great things. Now, whether or not he does that is complete mystery. But I don't think with, like, say, Christopher Bell, where he went from the 95 over to the 20, we kind of all gave him a little bit of time, even though he went out and won in his first year. We gave him a little bit of time. We were not expecting him to set the world on fire in that first year because he was still relatively new to NASCAR in the Cup Series. But with Chase Briscoe, he's got 2 wins under his belt already. He's older. He needs to jump in to the 19 and perform. Maybe even outperform what Martin Truex Jr. was doing. If he can do that, or at least be on par with Martin Truex, I think he definitely needs at least 1 win this year. But he has to perform up to par. He cannot be outshined by his JGR teammates. He has to step up immediately, because if not, then very quickly he's going to be the odd duck out of the stable. And when you're in a team like JGR Hendrick, you are going to be put on the hot seat immediately. That's why everybody is saying, Alex Bowman, he's going to get kicked out. No, but you don't want to be that guy that is always being talked about like that. Another one, Justin Haley. Justin Haley at the end of last year, a few races left, but he was swapped out with Corey LaJoie. He was in the 51, now he's in the 7. This year he's seemingly going to be in 7 all year long unless something happens. He's got to step it up. Corey LaJoie couldn't beat Carson Hocevar. I think Justin Haley has to be, basically, Spire is in a point to where really the only guy that can be the worst performing one and probably not have a problem is Michael McDowell. I don't think anybody's going to be really that upset if Michael McDowell is in last of these 3, because they know even if he's in the last of the 3, he's not going to be in a 31st points position. He's probably going to be in that mid-20s where he's always been. Maybe he sneaks out a win at Daytona or something. But if he doesn't do that, he's going to be in those mid-20s range. So what Justin Haley and Carson Hocevar, but most Justin Haley for this conversation, they need to be outperforming them. Maybe, those 2 are fighting for the top spot. Personally, I think Carson Hocevar will outperform Justin Haley. But Justin Haley needs to be outperforming, especially what Corey LaJoie did last year. Prove it's not the car that's doing it. I can outperform what Corey LaJoie was doing. I think he can, but we need to see that. Another one being Ryan Preece and RFK. Not as much, pressure on him. Cole Custer in the 41, same thing, not a ton of pressure. Then we have Shane Van Gisbergen. We need to see a little bit out of him because obviously the alternative there was Zane Smith. Really, for them two, Zane Smith and Shane, I think those 2 are just going to be like, okay, which one outperforms the other? Because those were Trackhouse's 2 options. Trackhouse went with Shane. Who's going to be the one to actually perform better? And this kind of brings me into my next and second to last topic here, is driver changes for 2026. It's always a conversation. Who comes in? Who goes out? What happens here? It's just something we got to talk about. I think the biggest question mark for a lot of people is Kyle Busch. And I think this depends a lot on how RCR and Kyle Busch work this year. If RCR and Kyle Busch go out and they win multiple races this year, I don't think anybody's going to question if he comes back to RCR in 2026. But if we get another winless season for Kyle Busch, I think Kyle Busch is going to be knocking on doors saying, hey, look, give me a deal. I want to go win races. I know he's probably got a decent deal there, but Kyle Busch wants to win races. There is no universe to where Kyle Busch does not want to win races. And I think anybody would be crazy to not really want Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is still not the oldest guy in the garage. He's still got some years left in him. I would be shocked if there aren't teams that are like, yeah, I'd like to have Kyle Busch, but he's at RCR right now. Another one kind of in that same bubble there is Daniel Suarez. And I think this is the biggest thing that kind of is a question for 2025 is Connor Zillage. Connor Zillage is coming up. He's going to be running for Junior Motorsports next year. And he's, signed a deal with Trackhouse. If Connor Zillage goes out, wins, 8, 9, 10 races more in 2025, no one is going to be saying, oh yeah, let's give him another year in Xfinity. Everybody's going to be saying, get this kid in Cup because he's wasting time. But with that comes the question, okay, where does he go? And personally, I think Daniel Suarez is on the hot seat if that's the case. Now, what happens with Daniel Suarez? I don't know, because I don't see them getting rid of Shane after 1 year unless he completely bombs and just decides, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't see that. I don't see Ross Chastain going anywhere. He's kind of like the I don't want to say it, but he's the Dale Jr. of Trackhouse, to where he's going to sell the most merch. So I don't think they can get rid of Ross Chastain. He's driving very well. Sure, maybe last year wasn't as good as it has been, but he's driving very well. He didn't get the win, so he's still there. And this brings me to my last topic of the day. Retirements. It's always a conversation. Some year there are some year there's not. And I think really there's only two guys that are in real immediate thought to retire. Now, neither one of these I really think are going to retire. I think this year no one major is going to retire, but I think these two, if anybody, are the two that could retire. The first of which being Austin Dillon. Now, Austin Dillon is not as old as normally you retire at, but because he's the grandson of RCR, I can see a path happening to where he decides, look, the team's not performing how it should. I would much rather get a guy like Austin Hill, put him in the Cup Series where he's performing well, put him in this car or put him in the 33, get rid of the 3, whatever, and then you can kind of rebuild that team with Austin Dillon being in management. It's no shock or no surprise to the world that Austin Dillon is not performing on the scale of other drivers in the Cup Series. He's one of the weaker ones in there now. Maybe he wasn't at the beginning, but nobody's shocked at that now. So will that happen? Probably not. But would that be the best for RCR if they have another bad year? Probably so. And the last one here, Denny Hamlin. I don't think Denny Hamlin's going to go out in 2025. But I do think it's going to get more apparent throughout the season whether Denny Hamlin's retirement day is sooner rather than later or on down the road with how well he drives this season. If he goes out, wins 3 races, everybody's going to say, oh, yep, you're going to keep going for multiple years. But if he goes out and only gets 1 or 2 wins, maybe sneaks a win in somewhere, maybe like a restrictor plate race or something, then people are going to say, okay, pump the brakes. Denny Hamlin is in his twilight years. That's what we really need to keep an eye out for. Now, I love Denny Hamlin. I know it's easy to hate Denny Hamlin, but I like Denny Hamlin. And I think I would love to see him around in the sport for longer. I know he's with 2311. I know he's got the lawsuit going on. But I think Denny Hamlin is a guy that can put the helmet on, completely change his mentality on what's going on. Now, whether we see that throughout this year or not is a big question. And we'll have to look at it again towards the end of the year, maybe even middle part of the year, and see whether or not this statement holds up. So that is my 10 storylines I think you should be watching and what I'm watching in 2025. Obviously, early in the year, middle of the year, there's going to be new storylines that pop up. Maybe they announce a new manufacturer, and then, like I said, we end up seeing, okay, well, which team's going to swap? Is there a new team coming in? Maybe they sell a charter, and then a new team says, hey, I'm coming in. That changes the narrative completely. But until that happens, I think this is the 10, highest priority things that we should be keeping an eye on. Do you disagree? Is there something else that you think we should be keeping an eye on? Maybe something that's under the radar that nobody's really paying attention to. Kind of like that mid-season tournament. I don't think enough people are talking about it, but I think it's going to be a big deal when that happens. I think that could outshine like the All-Star race. I love the All-Star race, but the All-Star race is not what it once was. But if you have an idea, let me know down below. And as always, subscribe. This is the second video on this channel. We are doing a few kind of fun videos in anticipation for the 2025 season. Once the 2025 season begins, we'll be doing a kind of video before the race, a video after the race, and we'll kind of do some midweek videos as well. My first video did very well. Thank you all for checking that out. So a few of you left comments and stuff. That was great. I hope you will continue to do that for this video and beyond. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you will subscribe and stick around for more. But until then, this is Slice Up Racing. I am Dan. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.